Good morning, students. We are carrying on our lessons this week on comparative suffixes, adding that ER ending or the EST ending. Remember the ER, the ending, is when we're comparing two things, and the EST is when we're comparing more than two things. And remember, we have a spelling change. So if a word has a Y on the end, before we can add the or the est ending, we have to take the Y off and add an I before we add it. If the base word ends in E, like brave, you need to take the E off before we add the ending. So I have some examples here for you. So for example, the word dirty. So if we were going to say that something is dirtier, we would have to take the Y off, add an I, and then put the ER on. Okay. If we were going to say there were 3 shirts and the red one was the dirtiest, we would take off the Y, add an I, and add that est ending. Okay. Remember, if there's an E, like close, if something was close and then something else was closer, so there were 2 things, one was close, one was closer, we're just going to take off the E and add the because we wouldn't have 2 E's there. Okay. And then the same for, there were more than 2 things, but the closest, we wanted to say closest, we would take off the E and add the EST ending. Okay. Now, if you have a word like strong that doesn't have an E or a Y at the end, then we just leave it just as it is, and we just put the ending and the est ending on the end. So it would be stronger, strongest. So we are actually going to do some together. So here we have the base word fierce. Now, if there were 2 fierce things we were comparing, and we were going to say one is fiercer than the other, we need to add that ER, but remember there's already an E on the end. So we are going to, let me just make this a little bit bigger, have to take off the E from fierce before we add the ER, okay? We don't want to have 2. Okay. Now, if there were more than 2, let me just make this bigger again, and we were going to say something was the fiercest, it's the same thing again. We're going to take the E off that's on fierce before we add the EST. So fiercer for 2, fiercest for 3 or more. Now we're going to do the same for creepy. Okay, so creepy, we're going to have creepier. Okay, so one thing was creepier than the other. Now we see there's a Y on the end of creepy. So when there's a Y, we take it off and we add an I instead. And then we add our ending. Okay, so we're going to do the same for creepiest. There's more than 3. Okay, so let's do that. Creep, we're going to take off the Y. We're going to add an I before we add our est ending. So then the same for lucky. So you are going to be able to do this and tell me what I'm going to need to do to change lucky to luckier. Lucky ends in a Y. So we're going to switch the Y for an I and add our ER suffix. Okay, because remember, suffix is the word for the ending that goes on the end. Now the same for luckiest. Take off the Y, add the I, add the ending. Now for clever, it doesn't have an a Y on the end or an E. So we're just going to leave it as it is, and we're just going to stick that ER suffix on the end. And the same for if there's more than 3 or more things that we're comparing, which is cleverest, we're just going to write clever and we're going to put est on the end. The last one is brave. So if we are comparing 2 children and to see which one is bravest, we have an E on the end here. So we're going to take that E off before we add the ER ending. Okay, and over here for the bravest, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take off the E before we add the EST ending. So there we have taken our base words, fierce, creepy, lucky, clever, and brave, and we have changed them and added the suffix er for if there's to compare if there's two things that we're comparing, and then est for if there's three or more. And we have worked with those different endings if they have an E or a Y on the end and figured out how to change those. So just like yesterday, you are going to have a word sort to do on Canvas, and you are going to click on a word and drag it into the right suffix box to sort the word correctly. And I know you will do a great job at that. And by the end of the week, we are going to be experts on comparative suffixes. So good job, everybody.